On Saturday night, a ballistic missile launched from western Iran crossed into Israeli airspace and struck the Bazan refinery complex on the edge of Haifa Bay. That is the single largest oil processing facility in the entire country. It supplies more than half of Israel's domestic fuel. And it was not a random target. The IRGC confirmed the strike within minutes of impact. Their statement was short and deliberate. Israel hit our refinery. We hit theirs. The weapon used was the Kheibar Shekan. The operation was designated the 27th wave of Operation True Promise 4, and it landed within the same hour that Israeli warplanes had finished destroying fuel infrastructure across Tehran for the very first time in this war. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to break down exactly how this strike happened, what the Kheibar Shekan missile actually is, and why it keeps flying after 9 days of relentless bombardment, and what the destruction of Israel's primary refinery means for the war, the region, and every energy market on Earth. Before we go further, please subscribe and hit the like button. It takes 2 seconds, and it keeps this reporting going. Now let's get into it. Here's what actually happened on Saturday night. Earlier that evening, Israeli aircraft struck oil storage and distribution infrastructure across Tehran and Alborz provinces. These were the first Israeli strikes on Iranian fuel sites in the entire war. Satellite footage confirmed fires at multiple depots. Residents across the capital reported walls of flame visible from kilometers away. By dawn, black rain was falling over Tehran. Actual black rain. Soot and hydrocarbon residue from the burning depots had mixed with atmospheric moisture and was coming down as dark, toxic precipitation across the city. The Red Crescent issued a public health emergency. 10 million people were told to stay indoors. Iran watched all of it in real time. And within minutes of those fires reaching their peak, the IRGC launched Kheibar Shekan ballistic missiles from western Iran directly at the Bazan complex in Haifa Bay. The message was not subtle. You burn our oil infrastructure. We burn yours? Now we need to talk about the weapon, because the Kheibar Shekan is the reason Iran can keep doing this. The Kheibar Shekan is a third-generation solid-fuel medium-range ballistic missile operated by the IRGC Aerospace Force. It was publicly unveiled in February 2022, timed deliberately to the 43rd anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. The name translates roughly to Breaker of Kheibar, a reference to the 7th century conquest of a fortified settlement near Medina. The naming is not accidental. Every element of this weapon's identity is constructed as a message. The specifications are worth understanding. The missile is 11.4 meters long. Its launch weight ranges between 4.5 and 6.3 tons. The warhead carries approximately 500 kilograms of high explosive. Its official range sits at 1,150 kilometers, sufficient to reach Israeli territory from launch positions in Iran's western provinces. A reported upgraded variant extends that envelope to 1,800 kilometers. But range is not the story. The story is solid fuel. Iran's older ballistic systems, the Shahab series and early Ahmed variants, ran on liquid propellant. Liquid fuel requires extended preparation. You have to fuel the missile on the launch pad, which takes time. Time means exposure. Exposure means satellites, surveillance drones, and signals. Intelligence can locate the launcher and destroy it before it fires. That vulnerability was the central weakness in Iran's arsenal for decades. The Kheibar Shekan eliminated that problem entirely. Solid fuel means the missile is stored preloaded. It can sit inside a commercial truck chassis, parked in a warehouse, indistinguishable from civilian freight, and launch within minutes of receiving an order. Iranian sources have claimed preparation time dropped by a factor of 6 compared to earlier liquid fuel systems. That single engineering decision is the entire reason Iran has sustained 27 waves of missile operations across 9 days without running dry on mobile launchers. You cannot destroy what you cannot find. You cannot find what looks like a cargo truck parked behind a factory. The warhead itself is a maneuverable re-entry vehicle on a triconic airframe, designed to maintain stability through aggressive terminal phase adjustments. It carries satellite-aided guidance that can correct course all the way to impact. Terminal velocity estimates from open sources vary significantly, ranging from Mach 3 on the low end to Mach 10, according to some Iranian state claims. That discrepancy reflects either deliberate ambiguity from Tehran to complicate Israeli defense planning, or genuine uncertainty among Western analysts about the system's real performance envelope. Either interpretation matters, because it means Israeli air defense commanders do not have a clean picture of what they are intercepting. And we will come back to what actually happened over Haifa Bay, because neither government has given a straight answer yet. Now consider what was targeted. The Bazan Group refinery in Haifa Bay is not a secondary facility. It is the central node of Israel's entire domestic fuel supply. The complex covers more than 500 acres. It sits approximately 2 kilometers from residential neighborhoods. It processes imported crude and provides between 50 and 60% of Israel's total domestic fuel output: diesel, gasoline, kerosene for aviation, and cooking gas. Israel has one other refinery. The Paz facility in Ashdod operates at roughly 110,000 barrels per day. If Bazan goes offline for an extended period, there is no domestic backup capable of compensating. The gap is structural, not temporary. Most people assume Israel's energy security is anchored in its offshore natural gas fields, Leviathan and Karish in the eastern Mediterranean. In reality, both fields were shut down as a precautionary measure when the war began on February 28th. Gas exports to Egypt were almost certainly suspended simultaneously. So when the Kheibar Shekan missiles arrived over Haifa Bay, Israel was already running its energy infrastructure in emergency configuration. The refinery strike did not find a system operating at full capacity. It found a system already under pressure, and this was not the first time. In June 2025, during the 12-day conflict between Israel and Iran, the Bazan complex was struck directly. 3 workers were killed. The on-site power station that generates steam and electricity for refinery operations was severely damaged. All production was halted. Bazan disclosed the damage to the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. Trading in Bazan shares was suspended. The Energy Ministry estimated 2 weeks to restore basic operations. Transmission lines, pipeline systems, and downstream processing units all sustained damage in that strike. The refinery eventually came back online, but the vulnerability was now documented and understood by every Iranian military planner with access to satellite imagery. When the IRGC selected the Bazan complex as its response target on Saturday night, they were not guessing. They were returning to a target they had already proven was penetrable. As of this reporting, Israeli military sources have neither confirmed nor denied the extent of damage from the March 8th strike. That silence follows the exact pattern of June 2025, when the full picture took several days to emerge through stock exchange filings and energy ministry disclosures. If the same trajectory holds, expect a formal Bazan disclosure to the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange within 48 to 72 hours. Now step back from the individual strike, because what is happening in Haifa Bay does not exist in isolation. It is one exchange in a rapidly expanding energy war that is already reshaping the global economy. This entire escalation began on February 28th, when the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, a joint campaign that conducted over 2,000 strikes across at least 26 of Iran's 31 provinces in the opening days. Supreme Leader Khamenei was killed along with senior commanders and family members. As of day 9, the Iranian Red Crescent reported at least 1,332 killed, including 194 children. Iran's response did not pause. By March 5th, the IRGC had launched over 500 ballistic and naval missiles and nearly 2,000 drones. 40% of those were directed at Israel. 60% targeted American assets across the region. The IRGC stated publicly that it considered the United States the primary adversary in this conflict and had prioritized American infrastructure for punishment. Targets included the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Group, the 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Al Dhafra in the UAE, and multiple positions across the Arabian Peninsula. 7 American service members are dead. And the Strait of Hormuz is functionally closed. An IRGC commander stated publicly that any vessel attempting to cross would be destroyed. Tanker traffic collapsed from over 100 vessels per day to 4 on March 1st. 3 of those 4 were flying Iranian flags. By midweek, transit had dropped to near zero for any ship without Iranian or Chinese clearance. More than 150 commercial vessels sat anchored in the Gulf with nowhere to go. 20 million barrels of oil moved through that strait every single day. That is roughly 1/5 of global supply passing through a single choke point. Only 4.2 million barrels per day can be redirected through existing bypass infrastructure, the Saudi East-West pipeline and the UAE's Fujairah line. That leaves approximately 16 million barrels per day at direct risk as long as the closure holds. The numbers in the energy markets tell the story faster than any official statement. Brent crude was trading around $70 per barrel when this war started on February 28th. By Friday, March 7th, it had climbed past $92. By Sunday evening, it crossed $100 for the first time since 2022, touching $107 before markets closed. American gasoline rose 43 cents per gallon in a single week. Goldman Sachs had already estimated a $14 per barrel geopolitical risk premium embedded in prices before the Saturday night strikes even happened. And the disruption is not limited to the strait. Saudi Arabia intercepted 20 drones targeting Aramco's Sheba oil field. The Ras Tanura refinery, which processes 550,000 barrels per day, sustained damage from interception debris. Bahrain's refinery was targeted. Storage infrastructure in Fujairah was hit. Kuwait halted crude production entirely and declared force majeure on all export contracts. Qatar, the world's largest liquefied natural gas exporter, shut down gas production on March 2nd and declared force majeure on LNG contracts 2 days later. Qatar's energy minister said publicly that if the fighting continues, every Gulf producer may be forced to stop exports entirely. His exact framing was that this will bring down economies of the world. European natural gas futures surged more than 50% in 48 hours. South Korea, which imports roughly 20% of its LNG from the region, disclosed it could exhaust its reserves within 9 days. Japan sources approximately 90% of its crude imports from the Middle East. India receives nearly 60% of its oil through the same corridor. This is not a regional energy disruption. This is a global supply shock accelerating in real time, and every consumer on the planet is already paying for it. Now here's the political layer that nobody in Washington wants to discuss openly. Donald Trump demanded unconditional surrender from Iran and stated publicly that he was not concerned about rising gasoline prices. The White House projected 4 to 6 weeks to achieve its military objectives. When pressed about the closed strait, Trump claimed Washington had already wiped out Iran's navy. On March 8th, Iran's Assembly of Experts elected the former Supreme Leader's son as his successor. The IRGC pledged allegiance immediately. The chain of command held. A new Supreme Leader was seated within 8 days of the assassination. And the missile waves never stopped. The Washington Post published details from a pre-war U.S. National Intelligence Council assessment, concluding that a large-scale assault on Iran was unlikely to topple the government. The same document described Iran's fractured opposition as unlikely to consolidate power even in a post-regime scenario. 9 days in, 29 waves of retaliation, a new supreme leader in place, the IRGC command structure intact. Iranian President Pezeshkian stated publicly that Iran will not capitulate. The missile tempo tells its own story. Analysts noted that Iran's launch rate slowed between day 1 and day 4, suggesting either deliberate rationing or the beginning of stockpile pressure. Then waves 25 through 29 arrived in rapid succession, deploying multiple different systems: Kheibar Shekan, Fatah, Emad, Khorramshahr 4, and a previously undocumented system identified in IRGC statements as Edimad. Either Iran holds reserves far deeper than any outside estimate projected, or it is executing a calculated final surge before its inventory reaches a critical floor. Neither scenario is reassuring for anyone trying to manage this situation. Share this video with every person you know who still believes this conflict is under control. Saturday night, both sides struck each other's oil infrastructure within the same hour. Israel's largest refinery, the facility supplying more than half of the country's fuel, was hit with precision ballistic missiles for the second time in 9 months. The Strait of Hormuz remains functionally closed to Western commercial shipping. Oil has crossed $100 a barrel. Qatar has declared force majeure on global gas contracts. Kuwait has halted exports. 7 Americans are dead. Over 1,300 Iranians are dead. A new supreme leader has been seated in Tehran. And not one government in Washington, Jerusalem, or Tehran has publicly defined what an acceptable end to this conflict would look like. That is not a war with a visible exit. That is a war running on its own momentum. And momentum does not negotiate. Thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate your support. Join the discussion in the comments below. Who do you think is winning this war? Is it getting out of hand? Let me know. Please subscribe and like the video if you want to stay updated, and click the video on screen to see another one. I'll see you soon.